Shura is really, really testing Shiki right now. One of the aspects about Shura that I'm very curious about is going to be his longevity in this series. Is he going to be the bad guy for this arc, or is he going to be somebody that lives through the arc and has a bigger role as the story goes on? Again, that's up for the future to decide. I mean, it's technically Mishima, but you know what I mean. Further points in the story to be revealed from where we're at now. But right now, I feel like he's going to end up pushing Shiki to a point where he's going to want to demolish him into like a borderline death, but otherwise into like a coma state, or just like permanent like brain damage to where Shura wouldn't be able to function. A large gap between Shura and say like Drac and Joe. Drac and Joe didn't go out of his way to intentionally coax Shiki out of anger like this. Like, this is very clearly at the end of this chapter, Shura is going after Shiki's emotions. He's going in specific ways in order to rile Shiki up and to get him angry. And a differing factor between, you know, him and Mishima's other characters, Natsu and Haru didn't have that kind of unhinged rage that Shiki has. And I think it's just like partially Shiki grew up obviously with machines. We know that he's very awkward for a human, and he doesn't have the best social skills and kind of interaction experience with people. And I think because of that, you know, that also leads up to a lot of his emotions feeling way more kind of like pure, to where like he is like happiness and his joy and his friendliness very pure, but his rage is like pure rage. You go back to like with Iliga, he was like going to just continuously probably beat Iliga until he was just like a puddle of like liquid flesh. And I'd be very curious if Pino didn't step in and do RMP, like would Shiki have killed him? Because I think again, a different point between Haru and Natsu is I think Shiki would be so angry he wouldn't think about whether or not he'd be killing somebody in the process of aggressively attacking them. So where that's gonna go, again, I'm super hyped up for, because Shiki, I've looked at Shiki in a way that his general tone again will also differ from like where Natsu and Haru were. Haru was way more of like a classical hero. Natsu is way closer to being kind of like, he's independent, maybe even close to like a borderline soft anti-hero, because like he's not like he's not somebody who's like just murdering everybody for the sake of doing good stuff, but he clearly doesn't have really allegiance to good or evil in the large scope, because he's primarily a good guy, but his alignment is always going to be to the guild. Whereas Shiki, I've looked at Shiki, and I mentioned this in a couple of videos. I haven't mentioned it in a while, but I view him almost as kind of like an anti-villain, where an anti-hero is a good guy that uses bad guy methods, where I think Shiki's essentially going to have to become a bad guy who uses good guy methods. And the way that it would really kind of like work out, it would be like Shiki as he is. The line that he had against I think it was Garrett, where he said that he would, you know, if the dude kept pushing him, that he was going to unleash the Demon King on him. And by those words, I viewed it as Shiki would be really nice until he got to a point where he would essentially have to actually be serious and, you know, unleash that kind of rage that he's got in him. And it would be like he has to only be a bad guy during certain scenarios and certain settings against his opponents. Like, look at his overdrive design. It looks very villain-like. Like, obviously all the black, he's got the gold, this like white hair with like these black horns, and the purple ether lines. Like, purple always isn't, you know, it's not automatically a bad guy color, but I've seen it on a lot of bad guys, especially in, you know, going with the black and the horns. It just, his overdrive form and the colors with it spell out bad guy, spells out villain. But obviously we know Shiki, but Shiki's like connection to Ziggy, I think will obviously kind of, we'll have like a tie to that as well. If it would be like, if you didn't know Shiki and you only heard stories about him, you would probably think he's a bad guy, similar to like how Ziggy seemed to be, you know, obviously being called the Demon King. His appearance is like this skeletal robot. But for Shiki and the people of Granbell, he was really nice and he was kind. We don't know the specifics and the variables of what, differ between that Ziggy and the Ziggy that we're seeing active right now. Regardless of which, I think it's a good standing for how Shiki is going to be in the future, potentially. And stuff like this is going to really kind of define him. Whereas, like, Haru had to learn to be a hero. Natsu had to kind of, like... Natsu was, like, a rough guy to start. He had to have events that kind of, like, soften him up, make him more kind of, like, honed in his kind of character of, like, being a normal person, the kindness aspect to it, and, seeing his more human-like emotions, whereas the Shiki, I think it's going to be kind of, like, opposing to that, whereas, like, Shiki already has those emotions, but Shiki has to kind of learn the more serious, aggressive type in order to kind of let go down his journey. But we do, like, get confirmation of what happened with Shiki after, like, the robot exploded. I don't know, I was, like, trying to figure out exactly, like, how would he do it? Like, is he making it, like, a gravity barrier around him, some form of kind of, like, a shell where, like, maybe, like, gravity's pushing out in all directions? So if there was an explosion, it would, like, kind of hit that force of pressure and maybe kind of either go around or get pushed back, and then, maybe either nullify the damage, like, in his area, or kind of soften it up enough that it's going to damage him but not, like, take him out. Did he get away in time? But instead we got the robots that weren't set to self-destruct, the ones that were just attacking him, went to go protect him because they knew that he like had a heart for machines, he cared about machines, and they wanted to do the last thing for him, like the last thing they could do protecting him after, like, seeing what he's like. It reminds me of when Gemini kind of couldn't attack Lucy because, like, Gemini felt like her actual emotions and felt like how she, how much she actually cared about her spirits and whatnot. And I think the robots, especially, like, knowing, like, tomorrow we're done, and this is a guy that actually cares about us. It doesn't matter if we know him, doesn't matter if he knows us. He sees us as people, sees us the same as he, like, a regular person. And I do like that. I like the way that Mishima has done the machines in his story. Like, I've seen series before, like, it's not uncommon for series to have, like, machines be treated and viewed similar to, like, people, or that kind of can be a struggle within the concept and the story of, like, do androids, machines, and whatnot along those lines, do they kind of, like, count as, like, the same as a regular person? And I think Mishima has one of the best ways of doing it that I've seen in a lot of series, because he's not just jumping right to, like, oh yeah, people treat machines the same, but in some cases there are. But we know that there's a lot of cases where people look at them more as, like, the machine just, man-made pieces kind of thing. And through characters, he's made it a lot better to connect to the idea of why they view them the same as normal people. And this is another good chapter that you get to see even that sad robot, like, shed a little robotic tear before he was going to self-destruct, because, like, as he was doing, he was like, I really don't actually want to die. And he knew what was going to happen. He exploded. All the machines piled on the Shiki to protect him. And he's just in tears because he's sad. He was moved, obviously, by them in their last moments trying to help him. But also, we did get more in the fight of Milani versus Homura. I'm surprised that it went into this chapter as well. I figured that Homura would have already kind of crushed her. I mean, it's very obvious in this chapter as well. Like, the gap at this point was much bigger. And we see, like, a really good close-up shot as well of Homura in her overdrive. Milani is just like, broke my mirrors. It seems like a good spot, or a bad spot for her. And I'm actually surprised that she doesn't have the ether lines that kind of go over the body, where they kind of start to move out. Maybe that'll be, like, upper members of the oceans, like the last couple, and then, like, maybe the leader will have overdrive, or it'll just be Shura and Nero kind of thing. Because so far, the only people we've seen with overdrive are, obviously really powerful, experienced fighters. And there's a clear gap between Homura and Milani. So wherever somewhere between that gap is like where I would assume the characters would kind of by default have overdrive. Like, if an Ether Gear character, a character in Ether Gear rather, is at this level, they should have overdrive. Kind of just like the bar of where you expect them to have these things. Kind of like in Bleach, being a captain, generally, being a captain or captain level is like a bar of, like, yeah, we expect you to have Bankai kind of thing. But She kind of just runs through her. Like, Milani makes these mirror clones of her and sends them in. I like the attack that Homura used. Was it her Kitsune Perfect Circle Strike? But the only question I would have towards that is, like, how does it work? Is it just like a circular slash attack? Is there something, like, additional to it? Like, is there any kind of extra power she gets while in her overdrive outside of her normal form? It could just be, enhanced stats, like enhanced attack power, enhanced speed, maybe, like, more just kind of technique and finesse. Or is there, like, an additional bonus thing that she would get on top of that is what I would wonder. But she obviously just beats Milani. We do get a moment from Milani that she seemed to care about Saika and that he was kind of like a grandfather to her. Like, he'd clearly known her since she was really young. There's like a part where she's a kid saying she wants to be a member of the Oceans. The only thing about that like I was like, wow, not like a not in a bad way, but I was like, I like the moment because it was like Saika was weird that we didn't see anything from him and he immediately got killed off. But, like, seeing the kid version of Milani, I'm just looking at her and be like, she had that hat even back then. She's still wearing it. Or unless it's like she's just getting the same brand every time. But she's very sad that Saika was killed by Shura. And the fact that she sees it as being killed is clear that she cares about the machines. And Homura is like telling her, the machines have hearts, but your mirror is reflecting who you really are. Kind of like I think more of like a bit of a poetic kind of like sentimental way about going in it. But after that point, we kind of get the information, obviously, of like these robots went to go shield Shiki. He goes back to the Eden Zur with Jin, and that's when we see Hermit and Sister in shambles. Like, Hermit's missing a hand, one of her eyes is busted. You have Sister like missing a leg. She's just in bad shape herself. Like, I've mentioned in my stream the other day, out of, like, when it comes to specific characters being sad, the ones that hit the most, like, with Fairy Tail, it's Urza, and with Eden Zero, it's Hermit. And when I see Hermit sad, it hits extra hard than any of the other characters, at least so far, when you just see that sad face on hers, and especially the way that Mishima did it with, like, she's got, like, a non-functioning eye, you have the crack down the side of her face, some of her, like, inner parts are exposed, and that's when you get this like enraged yet frustrated and nervous face from Shiki, and Shura paneled over to where he's got Witch kind of chained up and back at his base, wanting to bring, obviously, like, bait Shiki in. He's like, come on, Shiki, come over here, come play with me, we're friends, aren't we? I think that he really wants to bait into Shiki, and the way that he's talking, I'm curious if he's just kind of like saying that they're friends as like a kind of like a mocking way, or in his mind this is like how they're gonna be, like in his mind, like how they're gonna go about their interactions. Like, maybe he does see Shiki as a friend, but this is the kind of like, quote unquote playing that he likes, like putting people in this extremely aggressive and violent scenarios. So it was a pretty fast read chapter, but there was a lot of good stuff to talk about, a lot of good content, and like stuff to kind of like get your head wrapped around for the upcoming events in the story. Witch getting taken hostage was cool, but I did really like the moment with Shura. From the bad guy's perspective, I obviously really want Shura to get beat the hell up and be defeated, but I think Mishima is doing a good job at making him a bad guy as well as an adversary to Shiki. So we'll see how this goes. I think it's very obvious that Shura will have overdrive just based off of him. He's clearly strong enough to fight Shiki. I would imagine that they're about on level. Maybe Shura's got an edge. But if he didn't have overdrive, Shiki should be able just to body him. But after that point, like, it's just, setting up for the next chapter. We really just got two set focuses. We got set on, Shiki, Jin, where they were, and then what was going on with Homura and Milani. And I am excited to see where this goes. We don't know, which fight is next. I doubt that, obviously, that the next fight would be Shura versus Shiki. They just had their opening brawl, and I would assume that theirs isn't going to be for another chunk of chapters. So we'll probably get, like, a Y as a Jin and a Rebecca fight before then. Definitely a Jin one, because Jin is the other guy that I would assume has overdrive. With Wise, I'm hoping that we get him with that pseudo overdrive before that. Because unlike the other ones, his arsenal suit is like the equivalent of a power-up by itself, or like a primary ability, rather. it's not like he's got he's got his ether gear and then he has a gun that he can kind of like manipulate into different modes and different kind of ways of using it. His arsenal suit is essentially like its own power, because even if he didn't have his ether gear, if he just worked on the arsenal suit, that would be kind of good enough. His ether gear really is just kind of like it's a super flexible ability, but in a way it's supplementary to his arsenal suit. Like it's almost set to where his ether gear is the secondary power and his arsenal suit is the primary for his style of fighting. But he, I don't think, should jump right to overdrive, considering what we know about him, how he looked at it more of like using it by feel when he used his ether gear. And Rebecca, I don't think Rebecca should have either of those, because she's brand new. Like, she just got her ether gear kind of on like under control and like using it freely within like recent events in the story. So the most I would kind of hope for her is us kind of like spread out ether gear, like maybe it goes further up her legs. I'd be okay with like the ether lines moving off the body, but that's kind of like a bit like where I would want this to go to. I do not want her to have overdrive this early. So other than that, comment below, thumbs up the video, befriend the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. But in that, I appreciate how many are subscribed, and I thank you all for listening. Bye.